Hi there, guys. This is Rita.
This is Amanda.
And you're listening to
I Don't Know
I
Her.
Don't Know Her.
The podcast where we talk about
women that you probably haven't heard of.
But you definitely should have.
And you will. Hey!
Look at that. That is on the fly.
Like how we did that really slow and tentatively. We are both feeling a little slow and tentative today. So
absolutely.
Yeah. I've got another couple injuries. I burned myself. I threw out my back. Amanda's not feeling too well.
No.
So we're still here though. We're going to do our thing.
We're sticking with you. And I actually feel really drunk at the moment.
Really?
Yeah, like you know when you've had like 4 drinks and you're still like with it enough to follow conversations, but you feel yourself bobbing and weaving. That's how I feel.
You start. It's either the point where you start getting really loud or really quiet.
Oh, this is that like when you're feeling good, feel like vibe. Maybe 3 drinks in, depending on who you are and how your metabolism is. It's probably 3 drinks for me. This is a 3-drink Amanda. That's I feel just kind of like wishy-washy and woo free. And that's because I have been having a lot of health issues lately. And I haven't really talked about it on the podcast, not because I'm like some super private person, as you've probably already figured out if you've listened to any of these episodes.
Absolutely.
But because really we've just been trying to find answers. We've been trying to figure out what's the cause of all of these symptoms that I have. And they've kind of just been like piling on each other for like 2 years. Mm-hmm. And in the last couple of months, it's been aggressive. And it's just been like getting to the point where it's like invading my day-to-day life. So when I said that I felt like I was 3 drinks in, it's because I'm like dizzy. Mm-hmm. And the dizziness has been basically some days it's intermittent. Some days it's like a constant buzz. And one day last week, it was bad enough that I had to leave work because I couldn't sit in a chair without feeling like I was falling out of it. So that's been problematic, obviously, because when it ggets really bad, I just get very nauseous. So then I'm like dizzy and I feel like I'm going to throw up.
Yeah, and just uncomfortable and not yourself. And
obviously that can like really disrupt work. It makes it obviously very hard to run or bike because I feel like I'm going to fall off the bike or I'm going to run into a tree, either on my feet or on the bike. So it's just been like really disruptive. But what's been more frustrating than the symptoms themselves is feeling like whenever I go to the doctor, I'm being ignored. And it's been palpable. Mm-hmm. So,
well, it's been over and over and over where she's like, this is a serious problem. And they're just like, they don't believe her.
Well, it's like they hear one thing and that's the only thing they want to treat. Mm-hmm. So that's what's been frustrating. So for instance, I had an MRI in April and the reason I had an MRI was written down as headaches. No, that's not why we're getting an MRI. Do I have these really weird headaches? Sure, but they're not really like headaches. So like headaches are like, hey, you have like a pain in your head that you know, maybe on one side, maybe on both, maybe in the front or the back, whatever. And it lasts for, you know, maybe 15 minutes to a whole day or something.
Yeah.
That's not what's happening to me. What happens to me is I get this I'll be like completely normal. It's been happening a lot on stairways. So I will be like sitting in my chair in the library and I'll be like, oh, I've got to go run and do something up in the office, which is upstairs. And there's 2 flights of stairs to get up there. So there's a landing in between them. So I'll climb the first flight just fine. And then I'll get up to the second flight and I'll get on like the second or third stair. And all of a sudden, this intense pain will come on the right side of my head. And it will be so intense that I have to stop everything I'm doing and shut my eyes. And then maybe 15 to 30 seconds later, it's gone and I'm completely normal again.
That's not a normal headache.
No. It's not even a headache. No. It's like something else. And one day, it happened while we were doing a lockdown drill, and there was no one in the library but me. And in a lockdown drill, you have to shut off all the lights. And so I'm standing in the dark by myself in this room, and the flash, I'm calling them flashes now. The flash just happened because I got up and shut the doors quickly. Like, it seems to be like if I go from sitting and doing something, it'll happen like 30 seconds or a minute after I've done that thing. And when it was slowing down, like the pain came, it was super intense. I had my eyes shut. And then when it starts to come down, I was really paying attention because I had no reason not to. I was in a dark room by myself and I just had to stand there. So I'm like really in my body in this moment and feeling what this thing is doing. And as the pain is subsiding, it comes in like, it's like a throbbing. And as the throbbing is slowing down, I realize, and I put my hand on my heart, it was matching the beat of my heart. So as soon as my heart slowed down, my head stopped hurting. So I think there's something to do with like the blood flow to my brain is getting disrupted sometimes, not all the time, obviously. And I have no issues when I'm like doing high cardio or anything like that, like running and biking and stuff like that. It doesn't happen. It only happens when I go from like a seated position to like climbing a flight of stairs, or from a seated position to opening a door suddenly, like getting up like quickly, because obviously it's a lockdown, right? So I got up quickly, shut the door, shut off the lights, and then it hit me.
And so like something's definitely happening. Something's definitely being disruptive. But it's like you go to the doctor and like, how do you explain that?
And I have explained it. And they're like, oh, those are migraines. I was like, no, it's not a fucking migraine.
No.
And then I get this MRI done, right? So here's where things got real sideways. So I got this MRI done. I had an order for an MRI way back in August. But at the time, I was like, I don't have time for this. Whatever, everything is fine anyway. And then I started having more symptoms, and I thought, you know what, I really need to get that MRI. So I wrote in on my online portal to my doctor, and I was like, hey, I had an MRI order a long time ago. I'd like to go get it now. And a nurse responded and called me on the phone and was like, okay, I'm going to get this order for you. And she did it through who is supposed to be my primary care physician. But that person I've never met. Because for various reasons, I've been assigned a different one like every year that I've been with this particular program, because they keep leaving their practice.
Yeah.
So the only person I've seen consistently, which is 2 times, was a PA. And so when the order went through for this MRI and the results came back and they were not great, I do have things on my brain. I have these flares or lesions on my brain, and the radiologist gave a differential diagnosis of perhaps a small blood vessel disease or MS or migraines, which I do not have. And so I was like waiting for a doctor to talk to me about these results because they sound, a little intense.
Fairly serious. Yeah.
And no one called me back. And then I started writing to them, and I ended up having to make my own appointment to talk on the phone with a doctor about my results. And when I did talk to her on the phone, I'm trying to explain, like, at this point, hey, I've got all of these symptoms that have been compiling for 2 years. I've got bladder issues, sexual issues. I've got these brain fogs. I've got these weird bursts that are happening. I have dizziness and nausea and rib pain, this random rib pain all the time. And she's like, I don't appreciate your tone. I'm trying to help you.
Whoa. What did you say?
I was like, well, this isn't about you. And
wow.
And then since then, so she put in on the phone with me, she put in a referral for a neurologist, and she put in an order for me to do more intensive blood work. So I went in and had the blood work done, and all of the results came back this week, and there's been some flags and some stuff that doesn't look right in my blood and in my urine, and no one's called me to talk about it.
Wow.
So I've had to do Googling to try to figure out what's going on. And I was like, I'd like to see a neurologist earlier than August. And no one would help me get an appointment in Seattle. I had to do that myself. And basically, I don't have a doctor that's just like helping me through this process. Like the fact that I have to Google what these tests are and what the results mean to figure out what's happening is atrocious. And I am a white woman in this healthcare system with invisible symptoms, right? Imagine what it's like for a woman of color, and obviously you can imagine it. Imagine what that would be like to be someone who's even more dismissed. And we've talked about earlier in one of the episodes when we talked about, I think it was the doctor that you did.
Yes. Was her first name Barbara?
It was Rachel?
I don't remember.
I don't remember. I will know it when my brain is foggy. But right now my brain is super foggy. I can't remember anything. So, like last week, it's Pen 15, guys. It's Pen 15. I knew that, and I knew it.
She had a moment where she knew this show. Like she knew it. She's actually told me about it before, and she was like, and was.
I even tried Googling it,
blanking,
and I couldn't come up with the right like search terms to even find it. Whatever. Anyway, it was Pen 15. Everybody should watch it. But like if we talked about in that episode with the black doctor. It was the first woman to be a first African-American woman to become a doctor.
PNMD, yeah.
And I was like talking about how like there's so much you're hearing a lot in the news lately about how the whole medical industry and doctors in general think that like black people and particularly black women have higher pain thresholds.
Yeah, that's insane.
And there was actually, did you see that viral, like, I think it was a Facebook post or it might have been a Twitter thread. And it was this white nurse who was treating a black woman who had surgery or something. I can't remember what had happened, but she was progressively getting worse. And this nurse was like really trying to help her and kept running into roadblocks where doctors wouldn't approve increased pain medication for this woman. Like, and she had to like go around the doctors who were her direct supervisors and go to a person above them who happened to be a black woman who was like, yes, I'll approve that.
Yeah. And then what if that wasn't available? So what I was thinking was, Amanda was able, luckily, to be able to get to see a neurologist in about 2 weeks, maybe. So, which is awesome. She's not going to have to wait till August. Because when I heard she had to wait till August, I was like, that's miserable. That's complete agony, because then she doesn't have answers for all that time. That's more stress. That's more on her plate. And so she was able to see this neurologist, but it's in Seattle. And I said, well, what if you didn't have the transportation?
Yeah. What if I didn't have the luxury of having a friend there that I could stay with?
Exactly.
It's so expensive to stay in Seattle. It's expensive to go there. It's expensive to be there, like to eat and whatever. I mean, this is a barrier. And the reason why like my appointment is until August, that was the soonest they could get me in. And I'm like,
what?
What if what if I have a deadly disease that we could catch in time to save my life, but you're saying I can't come in till fucking August? Like, our healthcare industry is designed to, I think, especially people with chronic conditions or invisible problems, like things that cannot be just diagnosed with a cardiogram. Like when you've got something that's wrong with you that's globally happening, and everything that I've been like, every time I get a test result back, I'm like Googling, like, what does this mean? Or what could I possibly have? Almost every one of the things that comes up is diagnosed primarily in women. So they have every one of them is like, well, we don't really know why this happens, or we don't know the cure to that. And we just treat the symptoms. And I'm like, because these diseases primarily happen to women, and almost all of them happen to women of color. Like every one of the things I've been like looking at that have to do with my blood types and things like that are like primarily affect African American, Asian American, and Native American women.
Wow.
That's every one of them. And I'm like, oh, I know why you have no idea how to treat this and why you don't know why it happens. Because you're not studying that. Because you don't care what happens to women. And it's just been a really depressing journey that I'm on right now, because I'm sick. I know I'm sick. I've been talking about it for a long time to every doctor I've visited in the last 2 years. Like, there's something globally wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt crazy. So what's been actually helpful to me, and it sounds insane, but it's been really great to get test results back that say something's wrong.
Yeah.
Because it validates that I'm not hysterical, a word that was created by male doctors to invalidate women's true medical issues.
Yeah, they have hysteria.
And I did feel like that. I just started to think like maybe everything's in my head and I'm a hypochondriac. But here I am. I have an MRI that shows that there are spots on my brain. And when I have done my research, because no one's helping me, I've learned that these particular kinds of spots are very common in elderly people. But people of my age, it's usually indicative of some issue, which is why the radiologist was like, hey, these things could be your problem.
Mm-hmm.
2, my blood work and urinalysis came back with flags. One of those flags was that I probably have some kind of autoimmune problem, which runs deep in my family on both sides.
Makes sense, yeah.
For generations. And that's because, and I don't know if I've really talked about my heritage in the podcast. I identify as white because that's what I look like and that's how I was raised. But my family ancestry is not. It's very mixed. My family reunion in Oklahoma was quite interesting. And so, like, it doesn't surprise me that there's all of these autoimmune disorders that particularly affect certain races of women. I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense. That's in our blood. And then the urinalysis showed that I might have a UTI. And I'm like, if I have a UTI, then I've had the world's longest UTI, because the issues that have brought me in to with like bladder problems have been happening to me since June of 2017.
Yeah, there's no way you could have an untreated UTI for
2 years.
2 years and be able to tolerate it, or
especially because I went to an OBGYN.
Yeah.
In that time, and I had surgery in that time.
They would know.
They would know. And so what's more likely is something to do with this autoimmune panel that I got. Something is probably looking like a UTI, but it's not. It's some part of my body is like rejecting some other part, and it's manifesting with symptoms of a UTI. So it's all like, and I also came up with like these cells in my urine that are like, could be precancerous.
Oh, geez.
So it's like, I don't know what's wrong, but at least I know something's wrong. At least there's this evidence here and there's this evidence here. What I find at the moment the most terrifying is that there's no one there to help me.
Yeah.
And so it's just my friends. My friends get to hear me talk about my health like 24/7, and it's awful.
I don't mind. I mean, honestly, I am scared for her, because it's scary. You don't know what the hell is going on. And, there's no way for me to help her but be here for her. I can't even imagine what's in my body right now. I don't know. I don't display any symptoms of anything yet, but I don't have healthcare. So I don't know if I had half of what you had, how I would even know how to pay for it, or how to even get a test, or who would take me, because
you don't have insurance.
I don't have insurance. Yeah.
Yeah. And I am really privileged in that regard because I'm a full-time employee at a school district.
Well, you work really hard, so you have.
Well, I get it that's part of my package of working as a district employee. And I've been very grateful to have that, especially because last year I had surgery in February for endometriosis and some polyps and other benign tumors that were found in my body.
Yep.
And one of which had quadrupled in size in 6 months.
Yep.
So they were like, we got to get that motherfucker out of there.
And I remember when I went to that, I went and sat in the waiting room with Abby. And because I was like, what time's your surgery? What time should I be there? And you're like, well, Abby's going to be there. And I was like, cool. What time should I be there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That was already last year. Jeez.
That was February. And I hit my maximum out of pocket and my deductible by the end of February.
Oh my God.
No, you know what? That was great. It meant the whole rest of the year I could continue to go see doctors and physical therapists and all this other shit I had to go do.
Oh, wow.
And it was free.
Wow.
Because I had met all of those amounts. And because my district provides this thing called a health savings account. And
oh, yeah, you told me about that.
Yeah, they put a little money in and I matched that money. So I didn't even have to really pay out of pocket because I was like, dude, I can't pay these bills. Like even though I had like a pretty low maximum out of pocket, it still was too much.
Yeah.
It was still more than I could pay. So I ended up being able to dip into that health savings account and I used that money to pay for everything.
Wow.
So I was really grateful. Like I didn't have to pay for basically any of that. And I met my deductible and I was like, okay, guys, this is the year. Should I get my bunions done? Should I?
It's a buffet of what should I get done?
Like, can we argue that my brow is hanging too low so you can get a lift? Like,
well, I remember I was on my mom's medical plan until I was 23.
Yeah.
So I was really lucky.
And Obama increased that to 25.
Oh, that's amazing. So that was really lucky because that's right when I had my son. So I still had medical insurance, thank God, for when I had a baby. And it was about 11 grand to have, and it was a 1-night stay in the hospital. And yeah, I popped that kid out as fast as I could and grabbed my shit and left. It's like, I am not staying, but luckily I had insurance and I had dental as well. So my mom was like, your dental's going to run out in like a year or so. Let's get in there. So I had a dentist appointment probably every other month and I got 11 cavities filled.
Oh my God.
I had 2 root canals. I got cleaned. They were going to fit me for braces, but then I just decided I was going to deal with my crooked teeth. I don't care.
They're charming.
Yeah, thank you. I just got it all in because I was like, I haven't had dental since I was about 22.
But I'm thinking about starting like a video diary of just what it's like to start at this point and continue forward. Just because I think that there are many people out there who feel like I do, where they're having to be their own doctor and their own advocate.
Yeah.
And I mean, I really am at this point being my own doctor. Like when I reached out to be like, hey, my symptoms of like the dizziness and shit is worsening. I think I need to go see a neurologist sooner. Can you help me get an appointment in Seattle? The person responded, hey, I know we haven't met yet. And I'm not even sure why your stuff keeps coming to me. Like, cause you're my fucking assigned provider, you asshole.
Oh my gosh.
And then she's like, but I mean, why don't you just call the Spokane scheduling department and they could probably figure out who you need to talk to in Seattle, but you probably won't get in to see them sooner anyway.
Wow. So what if you had taken that and swallowed it and not pursued it?
Exactly.
Which I'm sure is happening to thousands of people.
Yeah, because doctors know more than you, right?
Exactly.
And so like she was like, well, they're probably too busy anyway. And here's the kicker. When I called the Seattle office, which I got the number myself from a member services representative that I chatted with online.
Wow.
And so I got the direct number to call the Seattle place. And when I called them and told them everything, and I was like, so when can I get in? And she was like, well, our next soonest appointment is this Monday. I was like, this month, like 2 days
in my lifetime.
And she's like, yeah, do you want to come in then? And I was like, well, I really hadn't prepared for that because I thought, well, there's no way it'll probably be at least, the end of June.
Yeah.
Nope, I can get in right now. And that was to me a testament of how fucking stupid this doctor was. Like, you clearly have no idea.
Yeah.
You have no idea. There are only 2 neurologists I'm a Kaiser patient. There are only 2 neurologists in Spokane that work for Kaiser. And so that's why they're booked out like 7 months in advance. And from what I was told from people who I know who have gone to this particular neurologist, they were like, oh, he's a dick. I was like, well, I don't want to go to him then.
Yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't listen.
It's almost like they have so much on their plate. They've been doing it for so long that they stop caring.
Yeah.
And it's more about the money side of things, which is just how I feel personally. It's just the people side of it goes away.
And like I said, all of these test results have come in and not a single doctor has called me. And when the MRI came in, basically I was told that the reason why nobody talked to me is because nobody could decide whose patient I was. So they just didn't.
Okay.
They were like, we didn't know who ordered the MRI, so like no one called you.
Could you at least call me and say we didn't know who ordered it, so we just don't have an answer? Like, could you just not leave me hanging?
I wrote to both of the people, like the last person I had seen, I wrote to her. The doctor that's been assigned to me, I wrote to her, and they didn't respond.
Wow.
It wasn't until I made a phone appointment that somebody actually fucking talked to me. I made the appointment. This is what I mean about this. The whole reason I wanted to talk about this is because we have spent so much time on this season of the podcast talking about women who found their voice or how much women have to do to advocate for themselves. Mm-hmm. And this is a perfect example of how in 2019, a woman is having to go to the ends of the earth and back to be listened to. Mm-hmm. And this is just about medical shit, an individual person's medical shit. Imagine how much harder it is to get real change done, to really move the needle and make big things happen. Go Elizabeth Warren. I'm really at this point, like, I want to say something to every woman out there who's listening to this podcast, who's had any kind of medical issues and been dismissed. You have to just punch them in the face with your shit and just be like, I have something that's happening to me and you have to listen to me. And if you don't, I will find somebody else who can. And start your fucking GoFundMe because our healthcare system is broken. And you put it on, come on our Twitter or our Facebook or our Instagram and you tell us and we will fucking push your GoFundMe out because this is absurd. Mm-hmm. And I want women to support women. And if you don't identify as a woman, but you listen to this podcast, particularly if you're a person of color or if you're non-binary or whatever, tell us because like we will push that shit out. Mm-hmm. I want everybody to get the help they need and the advocacy that they need in order to get their doctors to pay attention.
Yeah.
End rant. So who do you have today?
I have somebody fun.
Ooh.
Angela Jimenez.
I don't think I know her.
Fighter and soldadera of the Mexican Revolution.
Oh, I definitely don't. I was thinking of a Chicana activist from back in the 60s.
So I really know very little about the Mexican Revolution. I know some details, but I don't know a whole lot.
I know zero.
And I thought it would just be kind of an interesting subject to get into because the reason that I started researching women of the Mexican Revolution is I was listening to a different version of that song, La Cucaracha. Everybody knows that song.
Yeah.
It's a song about the cockroach.
Yeah.
And so my husband, who usually knows a lot about the history behind music and stuff, said, "Oh, did you know that that's about a woman who fought in the Mexican Revolution?"
What?
Yeah. And I was like, what? And so what the story is, it's kind of a lore-ish story. And it's about this woman who, because in the song, they're talking about the cockroach that crawls real low to the ground. And it does talk a little bit about like marijuana in the song. And so it was like this woman, there's a story of this woman that would she would smoke a little bit of marijuana and she would crawl on her belly really slowly and she would go to the other side and she would like assassinate people in the middle of the night. So the song
is really what the song is
about?
Oh my God.
So it's like looking at the history of this song, it's kind of crazy. I had no idea. I just thought it was just like this fun little song.
La Cucaracha.
Exactly. Cucaracha. Everybody knows that song. So I was like, are you telling me the truth? And he's like, well, yeah. He's like, that's what I had heard, it's about this woman. And so I was like, I want to see if this is really a woman. So
it's a real woman.
That it's a real woman. It's more of a song about this group of women and like what they did. So the Mexican Revolution rose out of the struggle for civil liberties and land, which would eventually topple the dictatorship of Porfirio Diaz and began a new age for Mexico. So Porfirio had been in power for 31 years.
Oh, yeah. Somebody should always be in power for that long. Not
And
at all
then-
going to be a bad situation.
Of course, his actions like politically benefited his circle of allies, foreign investment, and helped a few wealthy estate-owning haciendados acquire huge areas of land, leaving the rural campesinos like without a living. So like the little guy is getting even littler and stepped on, and the rich are getting richer. I mean, classic story, right?
Yeah.
So this war, it started in 1910 and it lasted roughly to 1920. So that's a long ass time. It was at its core one of the first and largest social revolutions where women as well as men were all called to fight. During this decade-long war, 1.5 million people died.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
that's a fuck ton.
That's a lot of people. I had no idea that
One and
many
a
people.
half million people?
Yep.
Shit.
And nearly 200,000 refugees fled abroad, mostly to the U.S. This severely changed the landscape politically, socially, and economically for Mexico. For many women, this conflict also offered a moment to break from the traditional role that women were playing at that time. So soldaderas, or adelitas, as they're sometimes called, are what women of the Mexican Revolution became known as. Some played traditional roles, such as like nurses, and they called them camp caretakers. And the majority of these soldaderas were women who traveled either with their husbands or male family members, and they provided some domestic help to the men as they fought. So the camp caretakers, I looked into their duties, and this isn't like you're just cooking dinner. Like this included like they're foraging food to feed the entire camp. They're loading and unloading supplies. They're helping take care and maintain the weapons. They're taking care of livestock. They're building shelters. They are cooking for the camp. They're taking care of the woman or the wounded, and they're running supplies back and forth from camp to camp. And this is 1910. It's pretty early times. It's not like they're jumping in the car and driving to the next town. You know, all of this is done on foot and going in between battles at the different times. So other soldaderas did not take on these duties. They took up arms and they fought. The least visible soldaderas were women who assumed male identities to fight. So they were not pressured to do this. They actually had a choice whether or not they wanted to. And each woman did what made her comfortable.
So wait. So these are women who, like, the job was to impersonate a man and then go into battle, or that was
they chose to.
Yeah, but like that, like there was like, hey, we need some people who do this, or was it like, I prefer to dress like a man, what we would probably consider today maybe non-binary or trans people who are like, I want to fight.
Yeah, they want to fight. And so as they're taking on this role, this is what made them comfortable. And so some of the men were okay with this because the women could get out of places by dressing both ways. It was actually a benefit. Other men thought it was wrong.
Obviously.
Duh. And they thought women dressing like men was not acceptable. So these women that chose to do that, of course, are faced up against other men that they're fighting side by side with. And some were open about it and they took on the repercussions, I guess. And some hid it completely because it was what made them comfortable. But of course, there's a danger when you put that
absolutely.
out there. So Angela Jimenez was born in 1896 in Jalapa de Marquez, Oaxaca. And she would become one of the most adamant fighters against the federales. And the federales were Mexico's military, and they served for Porfirio's agenda. And the federal army was run by senior officers, most who had served in long ago conflicts and wars, and they were decorated and put in high-ranking positions. And they just were old, and they were fat, and they were rich, and just had titles. So when the Mexican Revolution began, most of these old men were incapable of leading anybody into the battlefield. Yeah, which is, they were like, oh shit, we got to do something.
Oh my God, I have to do my job?
So,
I am unprepared.
So like when a lot of the rebellions broke out against against Porfirio, the federal army didn't respond because they didn't know how. Isn't that crazy?
Yes, absolutely.
I do have a little bit of a trigger warning for assault right now at this point in the story. So I'm just pre-warning. So when Angela was only 15 years old, she witnessed a federale come into her home, and they were looking for rebels in their house. And one of the federales started to try to rape her sister in front of her.
Oh my God.
So her sister was able to grab this federale's gun, and she shot him in the head. So she was able to kill him and defend herself.
That's how all rapists should go down.
I would think to, but sadly, her sister was terrified of what she had done.
Yeah.
And she was really scared of what would happen. So her sister shot and killed herself in front of Angela at that moment. Yeah.
No.
So
that's
very, very
awful.
Awful, traumatic. And this is how scared these people were.
Oh my God. That's so awful.
So after seeing this, Angela decides to pledge herself to combating the federales, and she joins up with the rebel force with her father. There were young girls who were fighting as young as 11 years old at that time.
Wow.
Women were second-class citizens, and this was an opportunity to fight for social change. This was a big fucking deal.
Yeah.
So even though some men and even the generals, such as, I'm sure you've heard of Pancho Villa,
Yep,
had a hard time accepting women, accepting the fact that they were capable of fighting. The women dedicated their lives to the revolution. And so Angela ended up disguising herself as a male soldier, and she entered the army in hopes of finding justice and peace for her country. She served various roles when she was in the army too, but one skill she ended up having quite a knack for was an explosives expert and spy. Yeah.
she likes things that
She
go
likes
boom.
things that go boom, boom. So I got some information from history.com, and this was noted in there that even though her appearances suggested she was a male soldier, Jimenez was not entirely disguised. The general of her group and most of her fellow troops actually knew that she was a woman, and they didn't say anything. They were fine with it. Through multiple missions and combat, she was eventually acknowledged as a soldier, and she was named a lieutenant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Which that's
a big deal.
Big fucking deal. So as a woman, she actually used her gender, kind of her dressing as a woman and a man, of course, to her advantage. She got incarcerated with her brigade. She changed back into her women's clothes, and they thought they had caught her by accident. She was able to leave. So after escaping prison, she actually went back to another troop, and she formulated and successfully carried out a plan of freeing everybody else who was still in the prison.
I was like, I hope she didn't just abandon her brigade.
No, she turned around, she came back, she broke everybody out. On another occasion, she was able to use she would change again into her female clothes, and she got to escape prison, and she even escaped an execution.
Wow.
Yeah. So beyond her physical efforts and contribution to the war, Jimenez also served as a spokeswoman for the soldaderas. It was definitely hard for these women to be recognized and respected.
Yeah.
And she openly confronted the male discrimination against the women. And she actually addressed this man named General Amaro. He actually, when the war was over and all these women had fought and died and put all this effort towards the revolution, he was like, "You did a good job, thanks, but I don't think you guys should be in the army anymore." So he banned women from the military.
Didn't that happen to another woman we talked about? that had like fought and whatever. And then afterwards they were like, you know what? I don't think women should be doing this.
That was the first Medal of Honor recipient.
Yes.
She had
from
received
the Civil War.
it, and then they were like, thanks, but you actually don't meet the requirements anymore, so we're going to take your medal away. But she never gave it back.
yeah, that's right. She was like, I don't think so. I'm keeping this.
Yeah, so this general, you know, I feel like it's so fucked up to just kind of pat women on the head and say thanks, but then just totally diminish their contribution.
I know. It's the most frustrating part, I think, of being a woman.
Yeah.
It's to like, be no like, you know, you did a good job. And then everybody's like, well, you did a good job for a girl.
Yeah.
Which is basically what it is.
Yeah.
And then it's like, and then go back and play house some more.
Yeah. It's like, thanks for everything you did. And we'll use you in the time that we need you. But then you need to go back.
Well, and that same thing happened over and over again to, like, for instance, Black men who fought for our country, like, the whole time. Mm-hmm. I mean, there were Black soldiers in the Civil War. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And they would be like, okay, I'm so glad that you helped us, but you're still a second-class citizen. Exactly. So go back to your place.
That's such bullshit. So she spoke out openly against this general, which was a pretty bold move, too. Yeah. Just speaking out, and period. Just
being like, you know what, that guy, fuck him.
So she told General Amaro, he actually became, the war minister of Mexico. And she said, to quote, she did not need the vital organs of a man to be a competent and brave soldier.
I don't need a dick.
Exactly. That when she saw men killed, women would pick up his rifle and shoot along with the rest of them. Mm-hmm. Women were half naked from making bandages from their own clothes. Women helped fight the war, and they should have the honor, not have that honor taken from them. Mm-hmm. So even though the soldaderas performed a wide variety of duties, they were remembered in years following the revolution primarily as almost as sex workers.
What?
So this is one thing, too, of like when I was doing my research, I was like, wow, these women really did play an equal part. And my husband was like, yeah, but I heard like a lot of them were just kind of like prostitutes. And I was like, in what way? Like they were supposed to keep men company at the camp, and they were supposed to just
that's not okay.
No. And so even from my husband, there's this mixed kind of blurred, fucked up line of like, again, diminishing what they did just as, oh, they were just there to keep the men company. And it's like, it's not like women didn't have relationships with men while they were there, or some women were there with their husbands, but that doesn't take away that they
were fighting.
We're fighting for the revolution.
And also making sure that you had something, you had your wounds dressed, you had somewhere to sleep, you had something to eat. Like, whatever.
And so that to me, it's just like, and this is the research that I did too, is as the revolution ended, most of the men, like that general, blurred those lines on purpose.
Yeah, they wanted to diminish the real
contribution these women did.
If you've been listening to our podcast, you know that we're pro sex worker anyway. Uh-huh. And there is a vital need and value in that work in and of itself. Mm-hmm. But to say that that's the only thing that these women were doing when there was so much other stuff that they took on is completely attempting to diminish not only their contributions, but their character. Because at the time, as you're talking about, that would have been looked down upon. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not okay.
I just felt like it was really just kind of single noting them, that's all that they did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the perception of them being only sex workers was actually encouraged by certain journalists and actually a lot of anthropologists.
Oh, like the anthropologists who also felt that the tattooed priestess was probably a sex worker because only harlots are tattooed.
Exactly.
We're like having lots of themes come together this episode.
So as a fighter and an advocate of women's rightful roles in the army, Jimenez remained an active part of the revolution for several years before immigrating to the U.S. She remained an outspoken woman and activist for a variety of causes for Mexican people. She helped start an organization called Veteranos de Revolución in California. She persuaded other soldaderas to share their story of what they did and what they went through for the betterment of the young people who were quite not understanding their role that the women had done and didn't understand even what the revolution was about. So she spoke out in front of the San Jose City Council numerous times, advocating for Chicanos and their right to bilingual and bicultural education in their schools.
Yes.
And she tried for a long time with her husband, Ramon Vasquez, to have children, but they couldn't have any. She said that she had gone to a doctor, and I guess before they would go into battle, they would shoot tequila with a gunpowder chaser to like get pumped up. And they said of all the gunpowder that she ingested, she probably made herself sterile.
Oh my God.
Which I didn't know that was a thing. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that was a thing either.
So she was like, I don't care. I'm going to have kids anyway. So she adopted, and she cared for numerous children throughout her life. And many of these children were orphans. They were foster children, and a lot of them were mentally and physically disabled.
Yeah, that's really admirable.
Very.
As someone who was a foster parent, that shit is hard.
Yeah. And to just be like, you know what? Give me my children anyway. So this is a quote from her. She said, "We challenge life itself, and many of us live to be in the hundreds. Each day is the beginning of a new life with new ways to attain a more harmonious existence with others." I really like this one. I was really excited to find stuff that happened to her after the revolution, because I really did have to dig, because it just said she emigrated to the U.S. Boom, like
like end of story.
And then she didn't. Yeah,
she did nothing else with her life, obviously.
So I actually found this book called "Soldaderas in the Mexican Military: Myth or History." This is by Elizabeth Salas. It is a wonderful book. Look it up. It's totally available to read online. And that's where I got a lot of this information of how the story has been turned into like the song, just a song that nobody knows about and what these women did. I went to soldaderas.omeka.net. Omeka is Omeka. I also went to history.com, revolution.com. And I found this really good paper by this young girl named Delia Fernandez. And it's at www.scholarwork.gvsu.edu. And she did this wonderful, probably a paper for college. It's really well written about soldaderas and kind of the same subject. Was this real or was it not? So yeah, that is my subject. Kind of one woman, but kind of us also recognizing a group of women who really did contribute to, doing a difference.
When we get done, we should look to see if she's in that book that Alicia got us.
That's right.
Yeah, that's a correction we need to make. Last week we talked about being on the podcast Drunch, and we kept calling Alicia, but she is Alicia. Ugh, what assholes we are.
I know.
Fucking up names right and left all the time. I enjoyed that story because I always like to hear about, first off, women who do things that are not quote unquote traditionally feminine. Mm-hmm. But I also really like it when women are like taking part in and playing a vital role in something that was a cause for their people. Mm-hmm. Like I loved the story of Lozin.
Yes.
So much. Mm-hmm. Like I can't get her out of my mind because I just loved that so much. And if you don't know, guys, that's episode 4. You should go back and listen to it.
That was a great.
That was like where we really hit our stride. Okay. What's funny is that you had one about a song, right? Mm-hmm. Well, mine is a musician.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to talk about Elizabeth Cotten.
I don't know her.
She's an American blues and folk musician who invented a whole new style of playing the guitar. Okay, so she was born as Elizabeth Nevels on January 5th, 1895.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Or perhaps 1893. There's both of those were in very reputable sources. Like one would say 1893, the other would say 1895. So I'm not entirely sure. But she was born in Chapel Hill, North Carolina to George and Louisa Neville. She was the grandchild of freed slaves.
Oh, that's awesome.
So her grandparents were like the first generation of freed slaves in the South. She was the youngest of 5 children, and their whole family was very musical, which always reminds me of when you guys talk when you talk about how musical your family is and how you guys had like a family band when you were a kid, like the Jackson 5 but Latinos.
It was pretty much, yeah.
And so I thought about that a lot, and I think that you'll find some stuff in here that's like relatable to your guys' life, except way longer ago. When Elizabeth was 7, she started stealing her older brother's banjo.
I thought like stealing, period.
She was really not supposed to like touch his banjo. It was like his prized possession. But if he wasn't around, she'd be like, I'm just gonna take this over.
Oh dear, this banjo fell in my hands.
You should tell our listeners about what Isai did to your Urban Decay. Was it Urban Decay?
It was Urban Decay. So I've got this super legit eyebrow pencil from Urban Decay. And I was saying, it's $45. And I go to do my eyebrows and it's jammed and the brush is mashed and it's all stirred up like a mud pot. And I was like, Isai. I go and I like, did you do this? And he's, yeah. Why? I said, why did you do this? And I just wanted to see how it worked. And I said, you just tell me. Just tell me. I even said, if you want, and then I started realizing, don't get too mad because maybe he's curious about makeup. And I didn't want to discourage him if he wants to put any on. So I checked myself and I was like, okay, so you just wanted to see how it worked? Yeah. Okay. Next time, let me show you. Yes. I said, if you want to put it on or if you want to watch me put it on or if you want, whatever you want. But you don't do it on your own. I was like, because this is expensive.
It's expensive.
And he was okay. And so he did actually the next day. He said, Mom, can I ask you a makeup thing? And I said, sure. So we'd go in the bathroom and he wanted to know about mascara. So I showed him. I said, do you want to put any on? No, I just wanted to see what it was. And okay. So if you want to try it, let me know. So, Mommy's open.
Like when I was a kid and I would like watch my mom put on makeup, like I was always just curious of like, well, like, what does that feel like? What does it look like? But I imagine like because he's a pretty like rough and tumble boy. I wonder if he's doing that thing where he's just like, what do women do? I don't get it. Why are all of these potions around?
What's these foo-foos?
Why is there so much stuff? Why do they put it all on their faces?
I told him what a pap smear was.
And oh God, I'm sure that was terrifying to him.
Because we watched something and they were talking about, I think it was The Office, and Michael talked about a pap smear and he says, what's that? And I like kind of got a little physical. I was like, oh, they go like in, and I used my fingers to like kind of display, and I go, and then they kind of open up the vagina and then they go in and they scrape it. And he was just like, no, he's shaking
no. And
I was like, well, it's what it was.
abort mission, abort. That's the way your child is feeling.
Yeah.
So the whole reason I was going to say that is because I imagine that her brother was like, oh my, no. Like,
don't touch my
banjo because, he probably paid for it himself and it's expensive and he doesn't want his grubby little sister touching his shit.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say.
So she did it anyway. She would sneak into his room and take his banjo when he wasn't home. And then she would like stealthily look around, make sure nobody could hear, because it's an instrument. You can fucking hear it.
Oh yeah.
And so then she would sit on the bed and she couldn't hold it because she was only 7. She couldn't really hold it well. So she started to play it when it was on her lap, and she would pick one string at a time to really understand how it sounded. And so that's how she really got to understand like, what do the frets do? What if I move this? What if I move the fret up and down like as I hold it? When she started to learn full chords, that's when she turned the instrument upside down because she was left-handed.
Oh, okay.
And the banjo was meant for right-handed players. So Elizabeth reversed it so that she could play it left-handed.
Nice.
When she was 9, she had to leave school and go to work full-time to help support the household.
Jeez, 9 years old.
9. Isai's 10.
I know.
Can you imagine him working full time instead of going to school?
No.
So she was doing domestic work in white homes, obviously. So she was doing their laundry and cleaning their floors and making their beds.
Intense stuff.
Yeah, when she's 9.
9.
When she was like 11 or 12 is when she began working a live-in job. So she moved into the house of a well-to-do white home, and she earned $1 a month.
Oh, that is painful.
Right? $1 a month. Ugh, we do not value work in this country. So she ended up saving some of her money to buy herself a guitar. She bought a Sears and Roebuck Stella guitar. $3.75.
Wow. Almost 4 months of work.
4 months of work. And can you believe that you could buy a guitar for $3?
Well, and two, it's not like she probably worked 4 months and saved those $4. She probably, because she had to live.
And so
she spent some of that
she
dollar
probably
a
gave
month.
some of it to her family because that was the whole reason she had to work.
So it was probably more of like 8 months of work.
Probably. It was probably a whole fucking year, really. She probably gave a third of it to her family, a third of it to pay her own expenses, and a third of it to save for buying a guitar.
Yep.
So she probably worked a fucking full year to save up enough money to buy herself this guitar. So obviously once she had this guitar, she couldn't put it down. She played it day and night whenever she had any free time. And that's when she began to teach herself a new style of playing the guitar, something that had never been done. What she would do is she played the bass strings counter to the melody on the treble strings. And so she would fret the strings with her right hand and pick with her left. This is the opposite of what most people do. Mm-hmm. And she would pick the bass strings with her fingers and the treble strings with her thumb. So she completely changed the way all of the strings are, basically, and everything.
Yeah.
Because normally you hold the guitar, even if you're left-handed, you hold the guitar and then you do the bottom strings with your thumb and the treble strings with your fingers. Mm-hmm. And that's how picking works. She does the complete opposite. And she was, by the time she was in her early teens, she had mastered a ton of songs. And she did everything by ear. She taught it herself. So if she heard something on the radio or if she went to a party or whatever and somebody was playing something, she would remember the melody and then teach it to herself when she got home. And so she learned all kinds of ragtime and dance songs. And then she began to compose her own songs at the age of 12.
Wow.
One of her songs was a song called Freight Train that would later go on to become her most famous song. And she wrote that when she was 12 years old. So she continued to work as a maid in households all across Chapel Hill. But when she was 15, she met a man named Frank Cotten and they got married. And it was around this time that she also converted to become a Baptist.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And the Baptist church was anti-music.
That's kind of crazy too, because I thought Baptist churches were pretty vibrant in music, but only
I think they are now.
Church music.
And I think it depends on the faction that you're in, because so my great aunt down in Oklahoma that I used to go visit all the time when I was a kid, she went to this church. I can't even remember what they were called. I think it was some form of Baptist. And so I had grown up in an evangelical church.
Okay.
And our evangelical church was music. It was standard church music. We didn't have some fantastic band or anything. Mm-hmm. But we always sang hymns and stuff like that. And when I went to go visit her, I would go to this church with her, and her preacher was black. And the whole... I want to call them the first family, but it's not what the whole and they were the leaders of the church. And this was a church that did not have any music. And the congregation was about half and half in terms of races. And it was no music. And I just was like, what is this? I had never experienced anything like that. I'd never been to a church where there was no music because I had only ever been to evangelical Lutheran and Catholic churches. Mm-hmm. And all of them have music. The Catholic Church has weird music, but it has music.
Yep.
Yeah, and so I went to this church with her, and I gotta tell you, the only thing I ever liked about church was singing. So sitting in a fucking pew with no music the entire time was awful.
Ugh.
I
couldn't
hated
do
it.
that. Yeah.
And so I think that must have been the kind of church that she was in.
Okay.
So they were really against her playing music. And in fact, they told Elizabeth that her music was for the devil because it was too worldly.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And worldly being like, I don't know, some kind of code word.
What does worldly mean?
I mean, normally you think it'd be like, well, I'm worldly, like I know a lot about the world, but I think it was more like you're being sullied by the world.
Oh, okay.
You know, it's like our kid talks a little bit about some of his family members and how they like don't believe in watching movies because Hollywood is this corrupt system from the devil.
Oh, okay.
And I'm like, so I think that would be kind of like what we went when they meant worldly. That's what they're talking about.
Okay.
Is they're like being influenced by these
corrupt worldly ideas.
Worldly ideas. Yeah. And she became deeply devoted to her faith. And so she said, okay, I'm going to give up playing. I can't imagine.
No, I wouldn't do it.
It's her passion. It's what she's been doing since she was 7.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would have a hard time with that. But again,
and
she got
how
married.
Old is she at this point? She's probably in her...
Well, she was only 15 when she got married to Frank Cotten. So she's probably only 15 or 16.
You know,
when she
it might be,
this.
She's married. Her husband's probably telling her one thing. Her church is telling her one thing. And so she's 15 years old.
Yeah, she's too young to really like fight against that.
Yeah.
And her and Frank end up having a daughter together, and her name is Lily. Mm. Later in life, she said that when she reflects on this time in her life, she said, honestly, I was just too busy to play guitar anyway. Mm-hmm. She was like, I was a new wife, a new mother. I had to keep on my house. And I also had to supplement my husband's income by doing laundry services for other households. Mm-hmm. So she just had a lot on her plate and was like,
And there ain't no washing machine with this. She's doing that shit by hand.
And you got to think like, I'm sure that you do this too. I have a hard time prioritizing things like music and art and writing in my life because they don't make me money. Mm-hmm. And that's priority number 1 right now.
Yeah.
So I think that's, when she says like, I was just too busy, I believe that.
Yeah. She's trying to help support her family. Yeah.
The family moved between Chapel Hill, New York City and Washington, D.C. for Frank's business, but they eventually settled in New York and he started a business there. And it never really told me what kind of business he had. So I was
just going to ask.
I don't know what
Frank
he did.
Do?
And she was still working as a housekeeper here and there. And it turns out that her marriage to Frank was not a good one. Mm. And it didn't go into details, but whatever it was not good at all. Because remember we talked about Grandma Gatewood and what a fucking miserable time she had and how it was really hard for her to get divorced. Mm-hmm. Well, you had to have some kind of crazy ass shit be happening to be able to get divorced. You couldn't just be like, yeah, we don't like each other anymore.
Yeah.
Courts wouldn't even do that. So she ended up getting divorced from Frank.
So something serious had to have happened.
Yes. And like I said, it's not detailed.
Okay.
So we don't know, but it obviously had to be something pretty big for her divorce to be granted. And when their daughter got married and moved to DC, that she followed her and divorced her husband.
Whoa.
So for 25 years, Elizabeth didn't play the guitar except on special occasions or some church performances. Then she had a fateful encounter one day. Elizabeth had started working at a popular department store around the holidays. She was working in the toys section when a woman brought in her 2 daughters. And she was purchasing some things. And Elizabeth was the one who was packaging up all of these dolls when the woman's youngest daughter, Peggy, wandered away and became lost. So mom is freaking out. Elizabeth is like, you know what? Chill, mom. I'll help you out. So Elizabeth is the one who finds Peggy and returns her to her mother, who was extremely grateful for all of this help and was so impressed with the way that she handled Peggy that she was like, would you consider helping us out on the weekends? It's like a housekeeper nanny sort of thing. And shortly after, Elizabeth was like, you know what? I'd rather do that than this department store business.
Yeah.
And I imagine that this woman must have offered her quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
So this woman wasn't just any woman. This woman was Ruth Crawford Seeger. And she was, at the time, a noted composer and music teacher. And her husband was Charles Seeger. And he was, at the time, in the midst of this, pioneering the field of ethnomusicology. And he had been a student and professor at a number of well-known universities like UCLA, UC Berkeley.
They sound really worldly.
They're very worldly. And you might have recognized the last name.
Oh, yeah.
So this is her entering the home of the Seegers, probably the most musical family besides the Jacksons.
Wow. Yeah.
Like everybody in their family is a huge, well-known musician. Ruth is a fucking composer, a classical composer, which at a time when women weren't really composers.
Yeah.
Like it's still rare now to find women composers.
Mm-hmm.
So to have her be a well-known at that time composer is a pretty big deal. And Charles is like breaking new ground in a whole new field of study in music called ethnomusicology, where he was like studying the music of different cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll get into that a little bit more because it actually influences some of the stuff that happens later. But needless to say, when Elizabeth Cotten walks into the Seeger home, it is a musical, like, panacea Toys R Us. Like, it is music everywhere, every room. There are instruments everywhere. Somebody's always playing something. And so, obviously, this is going to harken back to her own upbringing.
Yeah.
So it's inevitable that eventually she's going to fucking pick up a guitar. So one day, Peggy finds Elizabeth playing the guitar, and she hadn't asked if she could use the instrument.
Yeah, she doesn't. She's got a habit of doing that. Yeah.
I know. I was just going to say, I mean, like, this is a pattern
She's
of
like,
behavior. But she wasn't supposed to. Well, she felt like, I mean, you know, you've got to imagine, like, the politics of that situation. You know, she's this older Black woman working for this very well-to-do white family, and she's alone in a room and just takes a guitar and starts playing it. You imagine that she's not wanting to get caught.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, she gets caught by Peggy, but it actually wasn't a big deal. Elizabeth's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't ask. I apologize. And Peggy was like, no. You have to play for my family. You have to show them. So she did. And in fact, what she did is she played Freight Train from the song that she wrote when she was 12 years old. Elizabeth fingerpicked her tune and taught it to all of the members of the Seeger family because they were like, oh, I love this song. I want to play it. So they all started playing it.
Yeah.
Mike Seeger, who was one of the sons and already at that time had become a famous, successful folk musician, he decided to start filming their jam sessions with Elizabeth.
Oh, that's cool.
Because Elizabeth was like fucking brilliant. And they were like, people have got to see this. And this is back when, like, it was like those cameras that click.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
So these recordings that he would do later became the album Folk Songs and Instrumentals with Guitar, released by Folkway Records. And because the Seegers were this very well-connected, huge, important family, they were like, you guys, like when they would have dinner parties or whatever, these like important people would be over and they would be like, you have to hear Elizabeth play. You have to hear Elizabeth play. And then she started being asked to do private concerts. And she was even in the house giving a private concert to none other than John F. Kennedy.
Whoa. That's awesome.
So in 1958, at the age of 62, Elizabeth recorded her first album.
Aww.
It's called Elizabeth Cotten, Negro Folk Songs and Tunes, which was later reissued and can still be purchased now. You can go on iTunes or wherever and find Freight Train and Other North Carolina Folk Songs by Elizabeth Cotten. So in addition to Freight Train, the album that she wrote, this first album, became a staple folk album for showing the open tunings of American folk guitar and her specific style. Her single-string melody picking style that's heard on the song Freight Train was actually an adaptation of southeastern country ragtime picking and became known in folk music as cotton picking, which is, I think, really
That
funny.
is perfect. Yeah. Because I've totally heard that phrase before.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a play on a not so great history, but like it was Cotton with an E because that's how her name is spelled, Cotten, cotton picking. And this became this new style of playing the guitar that had never been heard before. But it was kind of like similar to this way that people had been doing ragtime before, but she like just took it and made it different in her own. So Freight Train became this huge success of a folk song, and people, as soon as they were hearing it, were like, I got to cover that. So Peter, Paul, and Mary covered it, Jerry Garcia, Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, Doc Watson, and like 100 more people.
Wow.
And Mike Seeger, who was the one who had already become a famous folk musician, was like, I really would like you to play with me. So he invited Elizabeth to come play, and the first time they played was at Swarthmore College in 1960 when she was 65 years old.
Wow.
That's when she plays like her first real concert.
That's like reminds me of Cesaria Evora, of how she didn't start till she was older.
Yes. Yeah. And I love, like we talked about, I think with Cesaria, like it's never too late.
Mm-mm.
I love talking about women who do something incredible at a time when people think women should just, like, I guess, lay down and die.
Yeah.
This is also, coincidentally, the time when the folk revival of the early 1960s is picking up steam.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, she's hitting it right at when the zeitgeist is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So Elizabeth started to play concerts and festivals with some of the biggest names in folk music at the time. She played at the Newport Folk Festival, the Philadelphia Folk Festival, University of Chicago, and the Smithsonian.
Nice.
And that's when she started to really get a lot of attention and recognition from the music people, like academies and things.
Mm-hmm.
So she got the National Folk Burl Ives Award in 1972 for her contribution to American folk music. And she actually was also given a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts.
Oh, wow.
To work on projects. And she started, she's starting to write more songs and included one that she recorded with her grandchildren. And it became her second most famous song behind Freight Train. And it was called Shake Sugaree. And that was later covered by Bob Dylan and became one of his best, most well-known songs. And in 1978, she was invited to perform at Carnegie Hall in New York City.
Ooh.
She recorded 2 more albums.
She went to the Super Bowl.
I know. That's like where you go if you're like a musician.
Yeah.
So she ended up recording 2 more albums. One was called When I'm Gone in 1979 and Elizabeth Cotten Live in 1989. Elizabeth Cotten Live went on to win the Grammy for Best Ethnic or Traditional Folk Recording. And when she accepted the award in LA, she said, "Thank you. I only wish I had my guitar so I could play a song for you all." Guess how old she was?
She's got to be in her 70s.
She was 90 years old.
Shit. Okay.
When she won the Grammy for Best Ethnic or Traditional Folk Recording.
Wow.
And at that age of 90 years old, she started a national tour called Folk City, which she opened in New York with Mike Seeger.
That is insane. Oh, and that's so great that she's doing it with Mike.
I know, right? She continued to tour and perform right up to her death. Her last concert was in New York in the spring of 1987 and was put on by a folk legend named Odetta. You might have heard of her. Elizabeth died June 29th, 1987 at Krauss Irving Hospital in Syracuse, New York at the age of 95.
Wow.
From 1957 to her death in 1987, she recorded approximately 6 albums and toured all over the country. In 1989, she was included in a photo documentary that's like a book, and it's really incredibly cool. It was called I Dream a World, Portraits of Black Women Who Changed America. She was one of 75 African-American women highlighted alongside the likes of Rosa Parks, Wilma Rudolph, Oprah.
Wow.
And there she is, Elizabeth Cotten. And I think that this was cool. I wanted to end on this quote. So Mike Seeger, who spent a lot of his time trying to make sure that her career was highlighted and that she was highlighted as this incredible musician.
Yeah.
He said of Elizabeth, There's no one like her that was ever recorded.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was going to share something earlier about Freight Train. I forgot. I think I left it out of my notes. But when that song became big, I guess it hadn't yet been copyrighted by her.
Oh, okay.
And some fucking like British band or something tried to say it was their song and like tried to copyright it. And she had to fight that for a long time. And she didn't get any royalties from that song that all of these people were covering and putting on their albums until like 1989.
Oh, geez.
It like took a long time.
It took a long time.
But the Seegers are the ones who like really helped fight that because Mike had all those recordings.
Oh, yeah.
And videos of her doing that. And we're going to put that video up on social media because that video is really cool. It's neat to see her play.
Mm-hmm.
She really was incredible to watch.
That's awesome.
So I used the Smithsonian Folkways recordings, which has this, she was like one of their featured artists. She also had a biography on the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Heritage Fellowship, Wikipedia, and encyclopedia.com.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Nick's been working on a project. My nephew is getting his, he's in college for like sound design and audio recording and he wants to get it like a production. And so he needed a band to do his end of the year project on. And he has to record and have his own professional session and work with the band and edit and mix and submit the song as his project. So he asked my husband and a couple of our friends to be the band. And my husband just said he killed it. He said he was just the way that he was dictating the room and the way that he was working with people. He had energy. He was just like, when exciting things happened, he'd jump out of his chair and be like, yeah, you guys did great on that. Let's do that one more time. Let's tighten it up. Like he was doing really good.
Oh, that's so cool.
And my son was there because we don't have a babysitter. And so he was getting kind of bored because he was, studio sessions are long.
Yeah.
And I remember that as a kid of being in the studio, and it's kind of boring when you're not the one doing it.
Yeah.
Exactly. So Nick actually was like, why don't we put Isai in the chorus? So Isai got to record for the first time and he's in part of the song. It's really cool. I like it.
See, now I have something to be jealous of a 10-year-old for. Okay, so we do have an announcement before we finish up our episode today. We have decided that we are going to do 25 episodes a season. So this is episode
25.
So we're going to take a brief break for the summer. We'll still be recording. We just won't release for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is going to be the end of season 1. Thank you guys for joining us.
Yeah, if you've stuck with us till now, we are very, very thankful.
And we will not be quiet over the summer, so don't worry about that. You could go on our social media and follow us anywhere. We're going to put up, we're going to do some videos. We did a video for making a cocktail for, not Ada Coleman?
Ada Coleman, yeah.
Yeah. And so I think we're going to try to pop up with a couple of those fun things. We might do some bonus material here and there over the summer, but we're not going to do complete full episodes for a while. I think we're going to start releasing again in August. So don't unsubscribe or something.
Yeah.
Just stick with us. It'll just be a little break for the summer so that we can get caught up. And we figure, everybody's doing their own thing this summer anyway. Everybody's always traveling and going to the beach, and you maybe aren't listening to podcasts.
Go back and re-listen to some episodes. Yeah. Revisit our ladies.
Yeah. So thank you for sticking with us, those of you who've been around. If this is your first episode, you're like, wait, what? Go back. You've got 24 to listen to. Every one of them is over an hour long. So holy shit, you got plenty of material. And we are going to be coming back refreshed, renewed, and hopefully healthier in my case.
There you go. Yeah.
And we'll have a lot more new women to talk about. And if you have over the summer some suggestions, go ahead and send those to us. We have an email address. I don't know her podcast @gmail.com. We also would really like to launch mini-sodes soon. Well, probably after when we restart. So we have gotten a couple of stories in, but we could really use a lot more before we could really start a mini-sodes. So again, if you have a person in your life, mom, sister, niece, cousin, friend, whatever, who did something really cool and interesting you feel like needed to be highlighted, write it down in like a paragraph and email it to us or send it to us on social media. We have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're everywhere. Follow us. And we definitely want to hear from you. And we definitely want to hear your stories about everyday women doing cool ass shit.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll read your stories on the podcast. And then you can like tag your cool women in it when they get posted. So, really just everything. And we would love to start featuring artists on our Instagram who do cool feminist, pro-women, pro-trans, pro-LGBTQ, pro-women of color kind of art. So tag us in the comments or something like that so we can see it, and we'll definitely try to share it. Rita's our social media guru, so she's on top of it. And don't forget to check out L7. They are an amazing band, and they are the architects of our theme music, written by Jennifer Finch, who also was the lead vocalist on that one.
She is. And they've got a new album out.
They do have a new album, and they're on tour, and we're going to see them on June 10th.
Yep.
So that's exciting. And thank you for joining us. Thank you to Lucas McIntyre, our editor, who's also a musician. Check him out. And thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
We appreciate every one of you.
Enjoy your summer.
Bye-bye.
All right. Out.